It's called the rubber hits the road question. That's one of those sayings. This is where the rubber hits the road. If you wanted to say, kids and sugar don't go together well, there's going to be a problem. We had my exercise group met together and had you bring food, potluck. Anyway, there was juice there with water and pop and sugar and sugar and sugar, and the kids just drank it all evening. And that's after going to Halloween and having treats every day. I said, they're going to be wild. Yeah, yep. Anyway, there's the rubber hits the road is one of those true statements. There's one that I've just read in Job a couple days ago. This is the true statement. Then the Lord said to Job, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I'm insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I've spoken, and I will not answer. Even twice, and I will add nothing more. That was 40, 1 to 5. The point was that he understood that God was in control. Well, in this passage is one of those rubber hit the road type of passages where God says you cannot serve two masters. It's clear. Some people don't want to serve any master. They want to keep their options open so that they can switch it if things change. Something better comes along. Truth is, they do serve a master or two, but they don't serve it either very faithfully or very cheerfully. I have a joke I tell at work. You know how that you can have customers that you can never please at all? No matter what you do, you can't please. So the joke I tell is, I said, the new phones, Apex has ordered new phones. They're coming and they have a red light that flashes on the phone. If the phone rings and it's one of those people that you will never be able to please, the red light flashes and you don't pick up the phone and it just rings and rings and it doesn't go to voicemail, and eventually the person gives up and calls somebody else. And the problem's solved. Well, of course that's not true. There is no phones that figure out who's a person that... But the point is that some people you can never please. They'll never be happy with anything, no matter what you do. And this is the problem with people who try to serve two masters. They're never happy with either one. And to be perfectly truthful, if the master you choose isn't Jesus, you're not going to be trying to be happy is a losing battle. And the devil doesn't really mind. He's just as happy that as long as you're serving some other master, he's happy and he doesn't care if you are. He's perfectly content with you to be miserable. It's fine with him. In Revelation 3:16, this is what I'm going to read 15 to 17. I know your deeds. This is the message to the church in Laodicea. I know your deeds, that you're neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were either cold or hot, but because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I'm rich and have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. The people in Laodicea were trying to hedge their bets. They were trying to make sure that if they served two masters, they could serve wealth and they could serve God and they're fine. And God says, no, you're miserable and wretched and you have nothing. Now, I would tell you, in the 50s, cars had what they called fins, tail fins. And it was to recognize that the jet age had come. And the jets were incredible things. It was like, it's just something pushing. The problem with jets at that time is they were incredibly exciting, but it was also one of those things that they were on the edge of the razor. And if they failed, there was no path. There was just like people died. Anyway, I read this article about the jet that crashed before it took off. And you're thinking to yourself, how would it crash before it took off? Well, what happened was, it was going down the runway, and it ran out of runway. And basically, there was nothing to do but keep on going into that rough ground, and it crashed and burned. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how could this happen? Well, for a jet to take off, there was a whole lot of factors that had to line up perfectly. And this particular jet had figured those all out. It's an 8,000-foot runway. He figured out the weight of the plane and what the wind was like and how much, all of these factors, the temperature on the runway, and he had 6,700 feet it would take to take off, and it was an 8,000-foot runway. He had 1,300 feet of extra margin of safety. So everything was perfect. Well, how did he crash? Well, it was because he was serving more than one master, and he didn't take into account the cost of serving those masters. The first thing that happened is, he'd figured everything out, and when he had figured it out an hour before, there was no wind at all. But when they started to take off, he taxied down the runway, there was a 4-knot wind he was coming into, headwind. That added 310 feet to the time, so now it was from 6,700 to 7,010 feet to take off. And he was supposed to take off at 11:15, and the runway temperature was 97 degrees. That was what it was on the tarmac. But he was delayed because they were fixing something on the plane. It was a half an hour later. It was now 101 degrees on the runway, and that added 190 feet. Now he's only got 800 feet of safety margin. And what he didn't realize is the runway looked like it went downhill slightly because there was a mountain in the distance. And he never asked. He never said, what's the altitude or the elevation here and here? He never asked. He just said, oh, it's downhill. It was actually 260 feet over that 1.5 miles, and that added 550 feet to what it required to take off. Now he has only 250 feet of safety margin on that 8,000-foot runway. And because they had been working on the plane, and the plane was in the shade, and the cool gas is heavier, the gas was heavier, required 350 more feet of runway. Now he required 8,100 feet of runway to take off. He had 8,000 feet. And what happened was that the people who knew that the plane would be heavier because the gas was cool calculated it and reversed it. They subtracted instead of added, and he was running on 3 hours sleep and black coffee, and he never noticed the mistake. So he had one chance to save his life, and that was abort the flight. He'd reached a certain point. He knew he had to be going this fast at this point, and he wasn't going this fast. He could shut off the engine and put on the brakes. The problem was, the runway used to be 7,600 feet, and they added 400 feet to the very start of it. But they hadn't moved the signs. So when he reached 5,400 feet and he had to put on the brakes, he thought it was 5,000 feet. It was really he was 400 feet farther down the runway. And then he knew it was too late, he couldn't stop farther on, and the only thing left to do was drop the tanks at the end of the wings. There was gas tanks full of gas, and if you flipped the switch, the tanks would fall off. And he would be lighter and he could take off. The problem was the switch failed, and he had to do it manually, and he burned up seconds that he didn't have, and he ended up just lifting off at the end of the runway, and he was going too slow and he crashed. See, he didn't take into account what those extra masters would require, how much they were going to take from him. And so, he died. This is what Jesus said in Luke 14:28. Luke 14:28 says, "For which of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all that observe it will ridicule him." You see, that man, if he had taken into account all of those things, and he had said, well, you know, it's a half an hour later, has the temperature gone up? If he thought of all those things, he never would have taken off. And it would have been a great lesson for somebody to learn who's learning to fly a jet. This is what can happen. You waited a half an hour. The plane was undercover. All these things, but sadly, it ended in death. Well, can you imagine how embarrassing it'll be when people come and stand before Jesus in the judgment day, and they don't realize what serving another master, and he says, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." And it's too late to count. They should have counted the cost ahead of time. Well, let's look at this passage. It's only one verse. As I say, we're conservation, we're only working on one verse today. Well, the folly of serving one master. It says in verse 24, the first part, no one can serve two masters. There are always lots of people who will say, I can do that. In spite of the fact that I know that everybody I know fails at serving two masters, I think I can do it. I'll be the exception. I was listening to a Focus on the Family, and there was a very successful businesswoman, a lawyer, and because she was successful and earned lots of money, not because she earned lots of money, but she ended up having a drug problem, ecstasy or something, but because she had lots of money, she could afford it. And as she drove her fancy car past the prostitutes down on the corner, she said, I can handle this, I'm strong. They're there because they're weak. And she went on to say, a year later, I was standing on the corner selling my body to get drugs. I wasn't strong, I was just stupid. See, the Bible's not wrong. When it says all these things, it tells you it's not wrong. People would like it to think and hope it is, but it isn't. It's batting 1,000. Everything it says is right and true. Well, and so every time we say, I know that most people can't, but I think I can serve this other master for a while, and I'll be okay. That woman looks at you with tears in her eyes, and she shakes her head, and she says, you're not going to do it. I said the same thing. If that pilot had just asked, how much is this weight, as in time, going to cost me? How much is this weight, as in extra weight of the fuel, going to cost me? And he had redone the calculations, because that's what they did. If you waited more than a certain time, you recalculated it all again to see what the things had changed. But they didn't. He just took the numbers he had. See, the truth is that we'll all serve another master at times. But we have to recognize that I'm serving another master. I better look at this and figure it out and change, or this is going to result in a tragedy. But if not, give it a shot. Give it a try. See if you can serve more than one master. You may be the first one in all of history that manages to do it, but I would say no. Now, there is one person, Jesus, who was, remember when he was in the desert, and the devil said, look, you can serve two masters. You just bow down and worship me, and I'll give you all the wealth in all the world. And if anyone could possibly do it, to serve two masters, Jesus could. But he said, no, it's impossible. You cannot do it. It's going to end in tragedy. Now, this verse that says you can't serve two masters, he picks money. If you look at the end of the verse, you can't serve God and wealth. The reason he picked wealth is because that's the one that most people struggle with. There's more things in the Bible that Jesus said about money. He talked about money more than any other subject. And he realized that this is the one that was hardest. But you know that money doesn't care. It's in your pocket. It doesn't have any feelings at all. And you think to yourself, well, if money doesn't care, if I serve it, there's only God that cares. And why can't he be satisfied with me serving him half the time? He only wants, in the Old Testament, he only asked for 10%. Why can't he be happy with me serving him half the time? Well, the reason is, God understands that if you serve another master, you will always resent whatever service you give to him. If it's money, you know that, well, I'm going to give, but it's going to cost me, and it'll be like taxes. You'll give it, but you won't be happy doing so. Now, number two is, what do they look like, this love and hate? I'm going to read that second part of the... For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. Now, you may be thinking, I'm speaking heresy, that God is happy with you hating. But that's not true. I think this verse advocates that it is proper to hate another master. That woman who was wealthy and had a drug problem and ended up a prostitute, she would have been better to hate that master that was trying to take over her life. I will have nothing to do with you, I hate you. So you see, any other master is a trap. And a snare of the devil, and I'm sure that it only wants to destroy you. It doesn't want to make your life better. So I think it's okay to hate it. This verse doesn't have any gray in it. It's black and white. It says you will either love or hate. It doesn't say, well, you'll like both. It's okay. There's no gray in it at all. It's all black and white. And it's a warning. See, God is not saying that you can choose days to serve another master. He's saying it puts you in danger every minute. Now, are you old? I'm going to say, are you old enough? But I know you're all old enough, because I'm old enough to remember the song that's Save the Last Dance for Me. I like the song. It's a really nice song. The tune is nice. The words go together really nice, but it's a lie. It says, this is one thing. It says, and don't forget who's taking you home, and in whose arms you're going to be. Save the last dance for me. But as you listen to the song, you say, she's enjoying dancing with these other men. She's enjoying their company. She's flirting. It's all. But just remember who's taking you home and whose arm you're going to be. Well, she may go home with you, and she may be in your arms, but her body may be there, but her heart might not be there. And eventually, even her body won't be there, because she'll have found someone better than you. Or she thinks is better. She's serving another master. You see, it's okay to hate a master that's going to pull you away from Jesus. Now, this is not going to look the same for everyone. There's lots of stories in the Bible. I'm just going to bring up a couple. Do you remember Ananias and Sapphira? Ananias and Sapphira took the example of Barnabas and others in the early church in Jerusalem, and Barnabas had sold a property, and he brought all the money and laid it at the apostles' feet and said, you do whatever you need to do with it, it's all yours. And so Ananias and Sapphira thought that, wow, I'd like to have all of that prestige and honor from the rest of the church. So they sold a property and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. But the problem was, they kept back some of the money. But they told them that it was, oh yes, we sold it for 1,000 denarii, and we're giving you the whole thing, and they actually sold it for more. It doesn't say how much, but it doesn't matter. You see, they were serving money. They wanted to keep some of the money. They wanted prestige and honor. And you see, they played the actor so well, they fooled everyone except God. Well, another person who actually fooled themselves. Do you remember the story of the Pharisee and the publican? Well, the Pharisee and the publican were both coming to the temple to pray. And the publican, which was basically a tax collector, he came to the temple and he stood in the corner away from everybody, and he kept his head down and said, Lord, I won't even lift my head and look toward heaven because I'm not worthy. Forgive my great sin. And the Pharisee came in, and he stood in the center where everyone would see him, and he spoke his prayer really loud and said, thank you, Lord, that I am the most wonderful person ever lived, and I do all these good things, and I'm not like that guy over there in the corner, that horrible person, that wicked person. I'm wonderful. He never fooled anyone else. He fooled himself. You see, he wanted prestige and to be honored by the people, and so he talked to them. He didn't fool anybody. There's another group of people. You remember it says you will love the one and hate the other? Well, this particular person, he embraced the hate. He was happy to hate God. Do you remember that guy? His name was Herod the Great. Herod the Great found out from the wise men that they knew where the Messiah was going to be. They would follow the star, and they said, where? In Bethlehem. And we go and tell us, and you come back. He hated. He wanted so much to have his rule safe that he was willing to kill the Messiah. He said, I'm okay with hating. I'm okay with loving the wealth, even if I have to hate God. Now, sometimes we will do something so that we feel better. There's stories of the people in the Italian mafia in New York and other places. This is some years ago. And they made a great big donation to the church. Big compared to most people. And they felt better. They just gave 100,000 of the millions and millions they'd earned illegally and doing horrible things, but they felt better. And this is, we can serve another master, but I'm doing all this for God, so it's okay. And this is what it says, the last part of the verse. You cannot serve God and wealth. Well, you have to admit it, it's true. You can't serve both. But here's the thing. For some people, wealth is no draw for them. They're not concerned about wealth at all. And if you're that person, well, good on you. But just know that it's not the only master that's trying to get you away from God. You've actually beat the most popular one, but there's a lot of other ones just standing in line. If the wealth one doesn't work, the devil has a lot of other ones. When God said in that booming voice from the mountain, "You shall have no other gods before me," and he wasn't just talking about wealth. There was lots of other things that people could use as their God that he was saying, "You should not have any more before me." Now, you might say master in this kind of dubious, well, I don't know if that's a master. You haven't figured, you're not sure. Maybe it's a half-hearted answer. But there's a third option, I won't serve either. And if you choose that third option, there's a philosophical question that you need to answer. Is it even possible not to serve no master at all? Well, you remember Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan became a Christian about 25 years ago, and he wrote this song. And the lyrics go, "You got to serve somebody." And then he had a long list of, you can serve this, or you can serve this, or you can serve this. And every chorus he put down, the chorus said, you can serve the devil or you can serve the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. So Bob Dylan was saying, you're going to. It's a given. It's a rubber hit the road thing. You're going to serve somebody. You're not going to get out of not. You can't just say, "I'm not going to serve anyone." Now, God talked about money more than any other topic because he understood that this is the thing that was most likely to crash your plane in your life. But some people, would escape that. And he's not really averse to you becoming wealthy in life, as long as it doesn't become your God. He's okay with that. Some people can gain a lot of money and it never becomes their God. And the other thing is, he's happy with you becoming wealthy if that wealth is gained in heaven. He wants you to become wealthy. He wants you to gain lots of treasure in heaven. Now, there's an advertisement, and I can't tell you what the product is, but it's the advertisement says, with membership comes privilege. So when you belong to something, you get privileges because of this membership. So I'm going to tell you what the great things you gain by having these things as your master. So for money, you get to spend it on things that you don't want to impress people you don't like. So that's that perk you get with money. For fame, you get to have everyone know everything about you, and they know your business, and they judge all your actions, and they're willing to say out loud, "I could have done way better than that person if I'd had all of those resources. They're not very good, I'm so much better." So fame only gets you, everybody talks about you derogatory ways. Well, if it's power, you get to have, most people hate you and cheer when things go wrong for you, and they have a knife ready to put in your back. Now, if it's beauty you worship, well, the problem with beauty is that you know that every day of your life you will lose a small percentage of that beauty. You won't be as pretty tomorrow as you were today, and a year from now, you won't be able, it'll take a lot of work just to get to the point that you wouldn't have accepted a year ago. so that's the whole problem with beauty, is it's fleeting, right? Well, if you serve Jesus, he'll save you from all these membership privileges that I've just talked about. And the good thing about serving Jesus is everyday things, little things that you do, the kindness of small things. God will reward you. He'll give you rewards that will end up going ahead of you to heaven. And God doesn't say to you that only these magnificent, important, wonderful things that Christians get written about in books are the only crowns you get in heaven. You see, do you remember the woman? This is the Christmas story I'm going back to again. The woman in the temple. They bring Jesus to the temple to do what is required. And this woman, Anna, who'd been in the temple for 70 years, praying, and, well, she got to meet Jesus. She didn't do anything wonderful or magnificent, but Jesus loves a long walk in the right direction. He loves the fact that if you can, see, it's easier to do one amazing thing. I'm going to allow myself to be killed, and it's over and it's done. It's much harder to do the right thing every day with no praise and no glory, and God is equally happy with the long walk in the right direction as he is to a heroic death. So, if you serve him, you'll get to hear these words, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master." And all those other things that you've set ahead, all those rewards. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you